Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation, and welcome to a pre-Thanksgiving edition of the Spartan Nation Podcast here on a Wednesday. A lot to get into tonight, Aiden, with a lot of coaching news kind of bubbling to the surface today, and obviously we'll dig into Michigan State's regular season finale against Penn State, and we'll see if we have time to get into any basketball today. It's a pretty loaded show, so um, we'll have to see what happens with basketball. Obviously, a big game for the Spartans tomorrow over in Palm Springs, California. Neutral site game against number 3 Arizona. Maybe a chance there to get some positive momentum back early on in this season. Not they've won 2 in a row here against Butler and Alcorn State. But with losses to James Madison and Duke, some of the excitement maybe taken out of the early basketball season, but a chance to upset a top 3 team tomorrow. But with that, we'll kind of dive into kind of the news at hand, and that's the coaching search that's ongoing for Michigan State. Again, a lot of news today in regards to this, and we'll try to break it down as much as possible here. Starting with like some of the betting odds, there was some new betting odds that were released today by Bet Michigan. And if you look at those odds, they've kind of narrowed it down to about a 5-man race, and that includes Duke's Mike Elko. He's the betting favorite at plus 450. Then you have Lance Leipold, the Kansas head coach, right after him at plus 600. And then 3 guys tied for plus 700 odds, and that's Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, Jed Fish over at Arizona, and Jason Candle, the head coach at Toledo. So I guess we'll start there, Aiden. Betting favorites right now, a 5-man race. We'll get into more of the breakdown and how we kind of see it shaping out going forward. But what's your initial reaction, kind of that 5-man, a group of candidates?
Yeah, so I know they released kind of a statement or kind of got reported that those 5 candidates were really the 5 guys that are getting second interviews. And I don't know the exact uh, times that those interviews are happening, but we like to think that it's ongoing right now, and that
Sure.
something will be a trigger will be pulled sooner rather than later on a coach, and an offer will be made that will likely be accepted, or at least hoping. I know there's people already talking about Luke Fickle in the comment
Sure.
section, so I know there's some I guess PTSD from that as well. You don't know until it's not set in stone until they sign on the dotted line. But I think Jonathan Smith right now seems to be the lead in my from what I've been kind of the tea leaves I've been reading, seems to be Jonathan Smith right now. So if you trust me, I'd put that place that bet right now, get you a
Sure.
little bit of money. So, but yeah, I think there's going to be an announcement soon. Obviously, this is the last week of football for the regular season, and then none of those teams are going to be made besides Toledo. I do want to give credit to Toledo,
Sure.
but the rest of them are not making their conference championship. So it is bowl season for them. So a lot of coaches, you see them, in this modern age of college football, kind of making those coaching changes or making those moves sooner rather than later. So we'll see that probably, you know, maybe by the end of November, but I would expect for sure by early December.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Like based on some reports that I've read, it sounds like a window of about 5 to 10 days, and we should know who
Hmm.
the next head coach is for Michigan State. Um, it's interesting. There is a basketball game, a home basketball game scheduled for the 28th. That would be a pretty quick turnaround for Michigan State playing their final game um, uh, on the 24th. And to get a guy over to the Breslin Center by the 28th, that would be pretty quick. I'm not sure if that's
Hmm.
because they do that with the basketball. Typically, you bring a guy out at halftime and you
Right.
introduce him to the crowd and all that jazz. So the 28th, maybe that's the day that we find out, or we'll find out before then. But maybe that's the day he gets introduced to the Michigan State faithful. But it might be the following home game as well. Yeah, as far as other guys who kind of made the list of odds, but these would be considered long shots at this point. Charlie Huff at Marshall, kind of surprised he's even listed here, to be honest. Matt Campbell, the Iowa State coach. There was a little bit of a rumbling about him for about a week and a half or so there for a while. But both of those guys are listed at plus 1250. And then Urban Meyer is still on the list at plus 1500, and that's also I kind of ironically that's the same odds that were listed for Harlan Barnett, who's obviously the interim coach. He's also at plus 1500. So that's kind of the landscape, if you will, as far as the betting market goes. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I do think at this point, Jonathan Smith is probably the leading candidate. There was a report from Football Scoop that listed a couple sources who, well, they didn't name the sources, but that's kind of how things go in today's day and age. They didn't name the sources, but they said, Smith is the target for Michigan State at this point. Now, Football Scoop is not exactly ESPN or Fox Sports or CBS Sports or one of those. Like it's a smaller operation, so take that for what it's worth. I'm not trying to discredit their work in any way, shape, or form, but again, it's not Bruce Feldman out there saying, "Hey, by the way, Jonathan Smith is the leading candidate." That'd be a little different, in my opinion. But it does sound like momentum has really swung towards Jonathan Smith today. It's interesting, those of who have watched our show have kind of known that for me, Jonathan Smith has kind of been my lead candidate for the last couple of weeks now. Your lead candidate has been Mike Elko, it seems like, over the last couple of weeks. And he's kind of, if there's a challenger or a 1A, 2B situation, Mike Elko is that guy. So I guess let's dig in a little bit more now to those two candidates, because they do seem to be the favorites at this time. Mike Valenti was on the radio, I think, yesterday, and he talked about both of those candidates, and he said the Michigan State alum, he's got some connections. He's not breaking news or anything like that, but he did say he expects Michigan State to hire either Mike Elko or Jonathan Smith. So narrowing it down to those two candidates, kind of give me your thoughts on those two, Aiden, and where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start with Elko. I think, he does have more Midwestern ties. He did coach at Notre Dame before going to Texas A&M and then to Duke to finally be a head coach. So he's in his second year as a head coach, and he's really taken a Duke program that, that's a tough place to win. And I know David Cutcliffe, who was the former Duke head coach who retired before him. He pretty much maximized out Duke, and they had 1 10-win season, and then they struggled at times to they bounced between kind of 3 to 7 wins ish. But Elko is making back-to-back bowl games with Duke in his second season, so I think that's notable. He does have a quarterback, Riley Leonard, who is really good. I think he's going to be a future pro in any kind of volume, but their defense has been really good too. They've been top of the conference, and at Texas A&M when he was the defensive coordinator there, they had one of the best defenses in the country as well. So I think just that kind of Michigan State mentality of being a defense first program for football, I think that's something that they kind of like out of him, is the identity that he brings to MSU. And then for Jonathan Smith, I think he has a similar identity, but it's on the offensive side of the ball. I think he wants to play physical. He wants to play kind of downhill football, and those are kind of some buzzwords, but that is kind of what MSU has done in the past to be successful. Just as a team and as an offensive unit, I think they've struggled to kind of find enough talent to spread it out and be like in Ohio State, where it's kind of air raid stuff. So the fact that he kind of likes to play some smash mouth football, I think there's a lot to like there with that. But I think the biggest concern that everyone has is he doesn't really have any ties to the Midwest. He's never coached in the Midwest. He's never lived there. He's been on the West Coast his whole life, and kind of what that's going to look like. I think, there's a lot of ways to compromise. I mean, coaches talk, and it's a huge network, and I think there are a lot of assistants around there, and I think Jason Candle at Toledo, if he's not going to get hired at Michigan State, I do expect some of his staff members to be hired by Michigan State, whoever their coach may be, because they've had some strong ties into Michigan, recruiting wise, and just being successful in the Midwest. So I think there's a lot to like. But yeah, I think Jonathan Smith, in terms of X's and O's too, I think that's a notable thing. I think while Elko is really good with X's and O's, I think that's where Smith kind of there's a lot more appeal from him, just because you do have that concern about being from the West Coast, but just kind of the football mind he has, a lot of people like, and the fact that he has taken a little bit more time to develop an Oregon State program that when he inherited it was worse than Duke's program. And yeah, so I think there's a lot to like for him, and then the fact that he does have more years of experience is also important.
No, I agree with just about everything you said there. And I think and we've been on this page for a while. We've both considered both of these guys high quality candidates. Maybe not some home run hire that like can't fail hire, but like there's not very many of those out there. And for the Urban Meyer crowd, I understand. Like from a football perspective, he doesn't get much better than an Urban Meyer, but it always had to be. Was he willing to come out of retirement to get back into the fire again? So, and there's still some people out there who, and not just like fans, like there's still some notable media types out there who aren't ready to bury that storyline yet. We'll get into that a little bit later, but no, I think the majority of reasonable and rational Michigan State fans believe that Jonathan Smith or Mike Elko would both be good hires. That's not to say if one of our audience members doesn't think that, like, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion as well. But I'm just trying to put it out there that we like both of these candidates going forward. Just some of the stuff that's come out about Jonathan Smith today, or even going back to yesterday. He was on a radio show with John Casano, who works for Fox Sports over on the West Coast, and he was asked specifically kind of about the coaching rumors and things like of that nature, and he was more honest than most head coaches are typically in these types of situations. And he said he's got an agent, and that's his job is to take phone calls and vet interest and find out who's interested in him as a coach. And he said that's why I pay my agent as much money as I do. So he was very upfront and honest with it, and didn't dodge the question. And then but he did say, like, he was asked, what about the Oregon State fans? Like, should they be concerned? And he says that they can be confident that he's focused on the task at hand, which is a big matchup this weekend against an in-state rival in Oregon. But yeah, he didn't flat out deny interest in other jobs, which again, it would be an indicator that maybe he is willing to leave his alma mater, which was kind of the hang up for Jonathan Smith, or something that we've questioned has been, it's a tough situation that Oregon State has found itself in with the Pac-12 dissolving. And a lot of the television revenue is not going to be available to Oregon State anymore because they won't have those media rights that they had under the Pac-12. So that's a concern for them. So would Jonathan Smith be willing to leave his alma mater because of those limited resources, or would he kind of feel maybe now more than ever that his alma mater needs him? Those are things that maybe he's still considering and weighing. Like, this isn't a done deal. He's got a game again this weekend. Would imagine at the conclusion of the regular season, you mentioned Oregon State's not going to play for a conference championship. Had a good season, but didn't quite get to that level. Would have had to knock off Washington last week, which they almost did. But like, that's going to open up some time for Smith to really sit down and contemplate things if he's been presented with an offer. And you're right as well. Like, typically offers don't go out until universities are very certain that they are going to get the guy, because you don't want
Mhm.
news of that leaking out. Oh yeah, they offered this guy, but he turned him down. Like, you don't want that kind of PR. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of the situation with him. He hasn't denied it. Oregon State's athletic director put out a statement today, and it reads this: Coach Smith and I have had ongoing conversations for more than a month regarding his future at Oregon State and our path forward for football specifically and our athletic department generally. He has embraced our short and long term plans. My number one priority is providing him with a new contract and guaranteed compensation that will help continue the success of the football program that has benefited Oregon State University and Beaver Athletics. Coach Smith and I have also discussed our commitment to extending assistant coaches' contracts and increasing the salary pool for his staff to retain the continuity of what they have all built here together for Beaver Nation. Now, that's a good statement from the athletic director, but if an AD feels the need to release a statement, that kind of tells you a little bit as well that there's a little
Mhm.
bit concern over there. So what do you make of I guess first Smith's comments to John Cazzano on the radio interview, and then the follow up with Oregon State's athletic director?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a little surprised by Jonathan Smith's comments, just how kind of open he was, and he was very honest about it. And he did say, he is going to be honest throughout the process, no matter if he leaves for a job or if he stays at Oregon State, that he would be honest with everyone and keep it pretty open, which he has so far. So there's that. And then, yeah, the athletic director, I think, again, this modern age of college football of, not only having these players kind of, um, have a free agency to an extent with the transfer portal, and you also have NIL kind of, you know, pushing that transfer portal kind of forward as well. So, it's the same thing for coaches. I think, the earlier they can get into new jobs, the better. Especially, not to mention that the transfer portal is opening up next week or 2 weeks from now. I can't remember. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly,
it
but
opens up after the
soon.
season. Yeah, after the regular season ends. So just having that in mind, coaches who are going to take a job, a different job are going to leave earlier. So yeah, I think that's the thing to look out for. I think that the athletic director, he can say all that. I know they did get a large sum of money, them in Washington State, for kind of abiding by their Pac-12 deals and contracts that they kind of got the rest of the money that the rest of the conference would get.
Right.
So yeah, so they have an excess amount of money right now, but how are you going to spend it? Are you going to spend it on, you know, Jonathan Smith for the short term, or give him, a lot of that money, and then you're kind of in the Mountain West, or you're an independent for the next couple years? Like how is that gonna really benefit your program? Because you're gonna be uh, competing with kind of teams that are going to be looked down, that you're going to look down on, and kind of feel a little silly that you're spending that much money. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of factors, and I think if Oregon State knew where they were going, I think this is a different story. I think Elko
Sure.
might be the play there, but they're not. So I think that makes him an easy target in a way for Michigan State.
Sure, and speaking to Elko as well, because I read another report from 24/7 Sports, the Devil's Den. I'm not going to give too much specific because it was behind a paywall, and I don't want to just throw stuff that's behind a paywall out there for the masses. But the general consensus of the report from the Devil's Den, which covers Duke, was that they're fairly confident that Elko will be back. Not only just won't take the Michigan State job, but that he'll be back at Duke for 2024.
Mhm.
But he did, but the report, just to suggest that things change quickly, and so that's not like they didn't put that at like 100% confidence meter. It was like a cautiously optimistic that they feel that Elko will be back at Duke next year for what it's worth. But that kind of lends itself a little bit to, as we stated earlier, Jonathan Smith maybe being the leader of the pack right now. This report from 24/7 Sports kind of backs that up a little bit as well. Let's briefly talk on this whole Urban Meyer thing, because obviously that's dominated a lot of headlines. And I will say, I would say probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago, it kind of like the Urban Meyer thing really kind of hit a fever pitch where it was very much at more excitement was being generated, and even from my perspective, who was kind of taking all of the Urban Meyer stuff with a grain of salt, started to be like, okay, we'll see what happens here. But then very quickly afterwards, it died down pretty quickly. One person, and we mentioned it in the comment section, one person who has not stopped kind of banging the drum for Urban Meyer has been Justin Spiro, who is a Michigan State alum. He's very popular on Twitter, has a very popular podcast of his own. And so I don't want to, this is not going to be like a Justin Spiro slam session. That's not what I'm doing here. My only point, I guess, is today, Justin Spiro has been pretty quiet as far as the whole coaching situation. The only thing he's really tweeted about it today was that it sounds like a decision is going to be made Monday either way. That's what he tweeted out today. Other than that, pretty quiet over there in his camp. So I guess wrap a bow on the whole Urban Meyer thing. That's probably a tall task for you, Aiden, but I'm sure you followed a lot of what Spiro has put out there about this situation. And what are your, I guess, general thoughts? And I've pretty much put it to bed, but never say never. Where are you at with that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think originally I kind of believe that there was some kind of mutual interest in some sort between Michigan State and Urban Meyer. I don't know how that began and how that ended, or kind of the timeline of that, but I do think that both parties did their homework. I think
Sure.
Urban Meyer does have kind of an itch to get back into coaching college football. I don't know what that looks like, but I think for however how credible Spiro's sources are, there is some kind of reasoning behind why it would be a place for him to land. But at the same time, yeah, I think the checkbook, I think the kind of the expectation that Michigan State's looking for, I don't know if he would be kind of the same Urban Meyer he was at Ohio State, or the one that he was at Florida, because those two programs do have a larger amount of resources to pull from, a larger kind of base for football. You're not really fighting with basketball for anything. I know Florida won 2 national championships in basketball while he was there, but it is a football school. And
Sure.
kind of the recruiting ground as well. I think he does have deep roots to Ohio, which is important, but it's different that it's different to sell Michigan State than it is to sell Ohio State. So I think for those reasons, I think that just shuts it down as a whole. But I do think at one point there were some legs to it, but I
Sure.
think it came down to how does it reflect on the school? How does it kind of look in practice? And kind of he's been out of the game for a while, and how is he gonna react to NIL? Being public, whether or not he did it in at Florida, Ohio State, behind closed doors is a different story. But the fact that NIL is public, and then yeah, the transfer portal. I think those are the two biggest things that would for me would be the holdup when looking at someone like that.
Right. Brian brings up a good point here as well. Justin Spiro is not the only media person out there who has done some reporting on Urban Meyer and been pretty adamant that that Michigan State could land Urban Meyer. So I'm not trying to. And another thing, I'm not in a position to question Justin Spiro's sources. Like, he must have some sources. Like, he's plugged in. He's, again, a Michigan State alum. He knows people. He talks to a lot of people, I'm sure. So again, this is not a slam Justin Spiro session. This is not anybody who was hoping for Urban Meyer. Like, we're not here to do that either. This is kind of the trajectory that has taken has been away from Urban Meyer over the last week or so, and maybe going back a little bit further. But no, like again, I'm not in a position to question Spiro's sources or his reporting or anything like that. I do find it a little strange that a few weeks ago he put out on Twitter that Lance Leipold had interviewed for the job, and then it was within hours that was kind of refuted. So there's different layers to that, different reporting. As adamant as Justin Spiro has been, I know another person in the Michigan State media market, David Harns, who's the publisher over at Spartans Illustrated, Rivals.com. He's been as adamant the other direction, that he's not a candidate. Like, he's like, Alan Haller won't hire him. That's just what he's been told, and he's been very adamant the other way. So like it's been kind of a back and forth thing. So yeah, that's kind of where that stands. So moving forward here, there was one other, and somebody mentioned it in the comment section. Let me pull that up real quick. JR Jr. talks about, Dave Doran's name come up with some reports. Spartan Mag has been in on that. That one was kind of out of, I don't want to say out of left field, but like when we've talked about this with this coaching search going back several weeks, didn't do a whole lot of talking about Dave Doran. So again, we're not confirming that Michigan State is down to two candidates. We're not doing anything of the sort. Just reporting on kind of what of some of the storylines that have jumped out today. So I guess any thought on the Dave Doran, I don't want to say rumor, but like some of the reporting on that as another candidate. We haven't talked a whole lot about him, so let's just give you an open floor here to talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of the short of it for me at least was I kind of interpreted it as, the same thing about the Tony Elliott and kind of Bronco Mendenhall uh, reports where, they're just trying to do their homework. They're going to interview a lot of guys. He does have Midwestern ties. He was the coach at Northern Illinois when they made the Orange Bowl way back in 2011, I want to say, if I got my history right. But yeah, so he has Midwestern ties. North Carolina State has had some success. They just had Devin Leary. They've had he's had guys like Bradley Chubb, who is in the NFL. I'm trying to think. There's a bunch of other guys that I can't name off the top of my head, but they have had constant success between kind of the 6 to 8 or 9 win range the past few years, and they're not the most resourceful ACC team. They're kind of above Duke or Wake Forest, but they're still below the Miamis, the Clemsons, the Florida States, even like Virginia Tech. So I think, yeah, again, it's just kind of doing your homework there with him, and yeah, that's really all I have to say on that.
Sure. I wanted to get your thoughts kind of on this comment here from Stephen Aiden, just because on Monday we heard from Harlan Barnett, his weekly press conference, and he said that he will get an interview for the job. That's pretty standard. Like, you're going to give the interim coach a chance to plead his case for the full-time job. We've talked about Harlan Barnett. We both think he's an excellent human being. But we both have agreed that it's probably in Michigan State's best interest to go in a different direction, maybe outside the program, bring in some fresh blood. And that's nothing personally against Harlan Barnett. It's just based on, what we've seen, not only this year, but like, again, it's kind of a similar thing with the whole Pat Darnduzzi thing, as far as like that's kind of looking in the past, and the Big Ten is going to be brand new going forward. Not brand new, but like, you're bringing in 4 West Coast teams. The playoff is going to be very new going forward, so maybe forward thinking. But to your point, or to Steven's point about keeping maybe Hawkins and Barnett on to help recruit, obviously this is ultimately going to be down to whoever gets hired. It's going to be their decision. But kind of give me your baseline thoughts on keeping a Courtney Hawkins around or a Harlan Barnett around to help with that transition. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think ever since Tucker was kind of fired and let go and all that kind of, I know you like to use the word debacle. I'll use that the kind of debacle that transpired. I've always been kind of an advocate that Hawkins would stay on staff. I think he's done well in terms of not only developing players but recruitment wise. He does have Nick Marsh still committed. I think Nick Marsh has been pretty public about sticking with his commitment based off of Courtney Hawkins still being on staff. So I think that's something important to look at. And yeah, like we've seen Keon Coleman, we've seen Jaden Reed make a jump to the NFL, Jalen Naylor, Montori Foster has kind of come on late this season and played well. So there is some development that you can see, and there's proof there. For Barnett, I think I'm kind of 50-50 on this. Because yeah, you kind of do want to keep another kind of guy to on the defensive side of the ball, especially since if it is Jonathan Smith, having a defensive guy stay as well is important. So I think I don't know really what his recruiting ties are to be specific, but I think it would make sense. But I also think I think there are a lot of other candidates with ties to Michigan State and the Midwest who are defensive back coaches or kind of defensive coordinators that would be like you're saying, like a more kind of forward thinking hire. And if they keep him on as a just an analyst or an assistant or kind of a role that Mark D'Antonio has right now, is just like kind of like sitting from afar and kind of giving advice. I mean, I would be totally fine with that as well.
Yeah, no, I thought Jay brings up an interesting thing here as well. I will say Alan Haller wasn't the athletic director who hired Mel Tucker. That was Bill Beekman. But I think to Jay's point though, like the same board of trustees that were around then are still around, and that's been a whole debacle for the last several weeks as well, and continues to get worse, I think is fair to say at this point. So yeah, I understand the skepticism of the Michigan State Board of Trustees. There's been some talk about that in the comments section as well. That's a cause for concern, in my opinion. I will say it sounds like for the most part, Alan Haller has done a good job of keeping the board at arm's length as far as like not revealing any information, because it's a board that has been known to leak information. But I will I thought it was important to differentiate the difference between Alan Haller did not hire Mel Tucker, and I did see some. I mean, I don't know who off the top of my head put this on Twitter, but somebody said that Alan Haller was in the athletic department and involved in the coaching search that landed Mark D'Antonio back in 2006. Six was his first year, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. So, Haller was involved in some capacity to the Mark D'Antonio hire. He's done a good job with hiring a hockey coach, Adam Nightingale. They're killing it right now. A top 10 program, just swept the number 1 team in the country last weekend. So he's proven he can make good hires. Volleyball as well needed a new coach, and they had a good season this last year, or in the middle of a good season. Sorry, I don't follow college volleyball that closely. So, but no, he's got a track record of landing good coaches. But I understand Jay's point about there's a lot of the same decision makers in place at Michigan State, and so I understand the concern there for sure. With that, I think we'll move on here. There was one other thing I wanted to get to actually in the comments. I thought. Let me just kind of do a little. I did think this was kind of interesting. UCLA has talked about, or there was a report that came out again from 24/7 Sports. This was before UCLA played USC. that pretty much said, it's a done deal that Chip Kelly's going to get fired, which was a surprise at the time, just because Chip Kelly has had, 2 solid seasons at UCLA these last 2 years. It did take him a while to get kind of the plane off the ground, if you will. But yeah, that came as a bit of a surprise, and maybe that does throw a wrench a little bit into the Jonathan Smith talk. My reaction, I guess, would be I think Michigan State's timeline is going to be uh, quick enough to where this doesn't become a factor, because number one, UCLA has not fired Chip Kelly as of now, and UCLA knocked off USC, or I don't want to say knocked off because they were both unranked, but they beat USC last week, and that's a feather in Chip Kelly's hat. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that dynamic of this situation, Aiden, with UCLA, Chip Kelly, Jonathan Smith being a West Coast guy, and so you can understand how there would be maybe some appeal from UCLA if he was willing to leave. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chip Kelly getting fired would not be the most surprising thing to me. I think a lot of complaints that people have had, around UCLA was, his lack of recruiting. I think he doesn't really have or really care that much about recruiting or having a footprint. He's kind of been, more active in the transfer portal and, making late ads in, his high school kind of recruiting classes. So that, that's kind of the aspect people are upset about, because UCLA, pretty much sells itself. I mean, you're living in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
It's a good program. It's not USC, but it still is it still should be a really, highly, touted program. So there's that. I think Michigan State, I think they'd offer Jonathan Smith more than what UCLA would offer him. I think there are some other factors around that UCLA program. I think that that Michigan State would be more appealing. I get the weather and being on the West Coast is really nice, but I think kind of just the day-to-day operation, I think UCLA is a little bit tricky when you kind of get down to it. When you talk about kind of, they don't have, their own stadium. They still play at the Rose Bowl. Facility wise, I think they don't have that as much investment. I know they did get some new facilities, but they're not as large as Michigan State's. Yeah, I think they're just kind of that. Michigan State seems to be a lot more established for football wise. So I think UCLA, I don't know. I don't think they really have the budget to compete with Michigan State right now, because Michigan State and, Alan Haller and even Bill Beekman wanted to show that their investment in the football program is large, and they want to compete with, the likes of Michigan and Ohio State. And I don't know if UCLA is willing to invest that much to compete with, the likes of USC and Oregon. So there's that.
And UCLA doesn't have anywhere near the fan support that Michigan State has. Like, we'll just throw that. Like, if you've seen the imagine playing in the Rose Bowl for your home games and not being able to fill the stadium. Like, that's just wild to me. But again, so Southern California, there's a lot to do out there. There's beaches and shows and all this, and so you're competing with a lot. So I understand that. It's just, but as far as like the tradition and all those things, Michigan State kind of wins in a landslide there as well, in my humble opinion. So there's that. What's your take on? I found this kind of interesting. I don't know if I'm the only one, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, or being naive. But so on Monday we hear that Harlan Barnett is going to get an interview, but he didn't say there was like a set date. Maybe he is keeping that to himself, or maybe he was just being truthful, and he doesn't know when that interview will take place yet. And then today, the Football Scoop report comes out that Jonathan Smith, he's the top candidate. I find the timing of that kind of strange. That Michigan State would have a top candidate before they even interview Harlan Barnett. Is that just me being naive? Because obviously we kind of expect that Harlan Barnett will not be the head coach next year. I think that's pretty well believed, across the masses. So, am I reading too much into that timetable a thing, or what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's tricky. I mean, they do have one more game left. I think he has one more opportunity to, prove what he brings to the program in kind of any way, even as a position coach. So, and, he did talk about in interviews and, post games that we went to that this is his dream job. Being the head coach of MSU is his dream job and it always has been. So I think it is fair to give him an interview. I think, uh, he deserves one for what he kind of
Sure.
inherited and and rightfully so. So there's that, but I think there shouldn't be any bad blood that they go with another coach. And yeah, I think it's that. I mean, I don't know what they need to see or what he has to do in the next 2 days to kind of change the change the narrative and
Sure.
find a way to win the job, but I don't really see that happening.
Right. No, it was always a steep hill to climb. Like Michigan State
Mm,
probably at minimum had to like reach a bowl game, and maybe even had to knock off one of those top candidates or one of those top schools, which again, they do play Penn State this weekend. We're gonna, dig into that game a little bit here shortly. Um, but it doesn't feel like he's done enough to really, and it was a lot of momentum that had to swing his way. And it doesn't feel like he's done enough to do that. But to your point, I think the fact that he was a player here, the fact that he spent 11 years under Mark D'Antonio here, and the job that he's done, just taking on this task this season. I know it hasn't gone the way anybody wanted it to or hoped it would. It's been ugly at various times. So no, I'm not advocating for him to get the job in any way, shape, or form. I do think, though, you make a good point that he has earned the right to have an interview and to plead his
mhm,
case and all of those things. Like, there's just, again, you don't want to burn bridges here. Um, he's an alum. He loves Michigan State. So yeah, give him the interview, let him plead his case, and then you keep him on as a, I don't want to say a consultant or something like. I think there's a role for him somewhere in the athletic department if he doesn't want to continue coaching somewhere else. We'll see how that plays out, but
mhm.
um, we'll kind of, I guess, tie that in a bow uh, right there and kind of move into our game talk a little bit. Obviously, we'll continue to monitor the coaching situation. It's kind of getting down to the nitty gritty here, and so we'll do that. With that, we'll move into the game this weekend or on Friday between Michigan State and Penn State. Michigan State is a big underdog. They're a 21-point underdog against number 11 team in the country. Three previous games against at this time top four teams have not gone well. I don't think Penn State is at that level of a Washington or a Michigan or an Ohio State, but still a very good program, a very good team. So I guess, what are your early thoughts on this matchup for Michigan State? I do want to point out before you get into your thoughts, and something that I did not do a good job of even in the last couple of weeks, is just realizing how beat up this Michigan State team is.
Mhm.
When you after beating Indiana, Harlan Barnett says, yeah, we've got 45 scholarship players like available in this game, like going into it, and you get 85 scholarships. Like that's half your team that was injured or had left with the portal. Most of those being injured. And I guess I didn't do a very good job of wrapping my mind around just how decimated this roster had been as the season has kind of gone on here. So I think that's important to keep in mind going into this game as well. So I guess your thoughts, I guess, on the game, on the scholarship situation, and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it did feel a little bit similar to last year where they were kind of down to they only had like two defensive ends by, week 11. So I think, there's that. I think for the game itself, Penn State, I mean, offensively, They are what they are. They run the ball. They're good at running the ball. Passing seems to be a hit or miss with them kind of every week. On and off. I think defensively they are what they are. They're physical. They're big up front. They're tough up front. They tackle well. I think the way that teams have beat them is to be more physical than them and to throw the ball. And I don't think MSU is going to be more physical than them, but I do think they will try to throw the ball. We did see Caden Hauser throw 41 pass attempts last game, so I think you can expect you can expect something similar this week. And yeah, I think what I'm most excited about is kind of what the environment and the atmosphere is going to
Sure.
look like having it at Ford Field, though.
Yeah, it'll be my first time covering a game at Ford Field, which will be a fun experience, and yeah, it'll be a fun experience. But I think you brought up a good point about Caden Hauser. Obviously, his best game. I think it's fair to call that his best game last week
Mhm.
against Indiana. He did throw 2 interceptions, so still some things to correct, but 3 touchdowns. I think he completed over 60% of his pass attempts, so pretty solid day for the freshman. Malik Carr, we finally got to see like the Malik Carr that we kind of anticipated seeing,
Yeah.
throughout the year, or even going back to a little bit to last year. And I will say, uh, I've been critical of Malik Carr. I think we have a little bit on this show, and certainly some of the fan base as well, and some of that's warranted. But I will point out that in that Iowa game, he was definitely a focal point in that first quarter. And then he gets banged up a little bit, and I think it took him a while maybe to get healthy again. And so we kind of saw him back at full strength this last week, and he had a career day, earned Offensive Player of the Week. Um, so I guess it's going to be tough against Penn State's defense, which is very good. As much as I don't think they, as a team, are as good as an Ohio State or a Michigan or a Washington. That defense is certainly up with some of the best units in the country, so it's going to be difficult for Michigan State to move the ball. But seeing what Caden Hauser did last week, seeing what Malik Carr, the mismatch that he is, does that give you any kind of optimism that maybe Michigan State can surprise a little bit on offense against a very good defense?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a little bit, but
Sure.
kind of like we talked about that, when they play these top 10 teams that they really struggled. They didn't just struggle, they really struggled. So I think, I think Penn State defensively is up there with the likes of Ohio State and Michigan. I think offensively is where they kind of tail off, compared to those two. Even though Ohio State's offense is not the greatest this year, but yeah, I think MSU will have a hard time no matter who's healthy moving the ball. And obviously, we did see Nick Samak also go down against Indiana too, so
Yeah.
that hurts the offensive line as well.
Yeah, no, I mentioned earlier injuries earlier, and your starting center now is not playing, and
Mhm.
Nathan Carter gets banged up in the Indiana game and misses the rest of the game. I can't remember exactly what quarter it was when he got hurt, but sounds like he could play this weekend. We'll see what happens. It's short rest, which that doesn't help either.
Mhm.
So, and then but yeah, it seems like every week that injury report gets longer, and then you factor in the guys who have been lost for the season. You factor in a couple guys who are no longer with the program, which I think Harlan does deserve some credit for keeping the roster intact for the most part. There's, I think less than 7 transfers after Tucker was fired, which I think is commendable.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the roster has taken a beating throughout the season. Um, I do find it a little bit curious to see what Penn State's offense looks like against Michigan State's defense, as diminished as MSU's defense has been with the injuries and things like that. But um, Penn State's offense has struggled at times this season. So just again, curious to see what that looks like. Um, with that, we'll move into over unders here, Aiden. I'll let you lead it off because I got to do some thinking as you're going through yours because I didn't have time to come up with any before, but I'll make them up on the fly. So go ahead and get us started.
All right, so my first one kind of goes back to the offense. So Caden Hauser did throw 3 touchdowns last week. So I have his over under touchdowns set at 1.5.
Okay. I'll go under for 1.5 total touchdowns. Wouldn't be surprised if he finds Malik Carr or a Montori Foster for a score at some point during the game. But again, very good Penn State defense, and so I'll go with the under on 1.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the over here.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think they're just gonna try to throw the ball a lot. I think that's gonna be, similar to what we saw last week, and I think that if there's any chance of them beating Penn State, that's the way they're gonna do it.
I'll flip your question kind of on its head a little bit, and I'll go Drew Aller, who was banged up a little bit last week against Rutgers. I'll set the same line, 1.5 passing touchdowns for Drew Aller.
I'm gonna take the under on this. I think
Okay.
Michigan State's pass defense has done well. And I think Drew Aller has struggled, or just the Penn State kind of receivers as a whole have really struggled this season, kind of getting in a rhythm and finding a kind of just a game, like a complete game to, create plays and kind of, find the open targets. So I'll go under.
Yeah, I'm with you on that as well. I'm going to go under as well. I think to your point, Penn State is more of a rush offense. Two very good running backs. They just haven't generated a whole lot of running room for them against some of the better teams. You're talking about Michigan and Ohio State. Kind of, I don't want to say they've wasted that talent, but they came up short against both of those teams. JJ's asking interception touch. I'm assuming you're talking about Caden Hauser here. Hauser has thrown 6 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions to answer your question. I'm not sure what Drew Aller's numbers are, but I'm sure he's thrown more touchdown passes than interceptions.
Yeah, I think he only. I think he might be asking if if this game. If he will have. I don't know.
That's a good question. That's a good question for this specific game. Again, the 2 interceptions against Indiana. He got away with one of them because the Indiana defender was stripped on the second one. So sorry, JJ, didn't understand your question there. That's a good question. I think he'll throw a touchdown pass. He might throw an interception. He might throw. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I think I'll go with a push. Maybe he throws a pick.
I'm thinking the same thing. I think he can throw more than. I think he can get to 2 touchdowns, but I do think he will also have 2 turnovers.
Okay. Yeah, so we're on the same page with Aller. I'm going to go under 1.5 passing touchdowns. Same with you. We're different. We're different on Hauser, but go ahead and hit me with your second over under.
Yeah, so it is another offensive kind of related question. So Michigan State total yards of offense, I said at 225. Over under. I know Penn State has a really good defense. I think they only allow 238 yards a game. So yeah, over under 225.
For Michigan State total offense?
Yeah.
225. Man, that doesn't seem very hard to do or very high, but again, a good defense. So we've talked about the injuries. I'll go over, but I don't feel great about it. I think they'll put a couple of drives together. And I do have, like, when we get into our score predictions, I do have a couple of scoring drives. So yeah, I guess I'll go over, but I don't feel very strongly about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think I'm gonna go over just because I picked Caden Hauser to have 2 touchdown passes. I kind of feel obligated, or kind of give some reasoning to that to take the over.
Okay, so we're in agreement there. JJ likes the under on 225. Michigan State's pass rush has been kind of an enigma this season. Like early on in the season, it seemed like they were getting some pressure but not getting home. They have had some games where they've produced several sacks, and then other games where they haven't produced any. So I guess I'll set an over/under for Michigan State's defense at just 1.5 sacks of Drew Aller. Not the most mobile of quarterbacks, and he was banged up a little bit last week against Rutgers. But also Penn State's offensive line's pretty solid, especially the tackle. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but probably going to be a first round draft pick. So where you're at with this number, 1.5 sacks for Michigan State.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under. I think partially it's gonna be Penn State is gonna run the ball a lot, and partially gonna be because Penn State does have a good offensive line. So yeah, I'll take the under on that.
I'm with you as well. I think even if Michigan State's edge rushers were at full strength and they had their full complement, I think this would be a tall task just because I do think Penn State's offensive line is pretty solid. So I'll take the under as well. Maybe they get to Aller once on Friday, but two would be difficult. As I mentioned earlier, there's been some games where they haven't been able to get home. So I'm with you. I'm going to take the under. All right, hit me with one more over under.
All right, this one isn't a over under as much. It's just kind of a question: who's gonna have more tackles on defense? Because like I talked about, Penn State likes to run the ball. Is it gonna be Cal Haladay or Aaron Brule?
I'll go Aaron Brule. I think he's really come into his own these last several weeks. He's been a leader of the team. He goes in front of the media just about every post game, and has represented the university well. And I also think he's played pretty well over these last several weeks as well. Cal Haladay is a run stuffing linebacker, and so there's no doubt that he will be relied on quite a bit on Friday. But I just like the way that Brule has been playing in recent weeks, and so I'll go with him.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Haladay here. I think
Okay.
he, while he has had some struggles and kind of been quiet in some games, I think he has still been pretty decent in the run game. And I think, you know, the game plan going into this game, they know Penn State is gonna like to run the ball. So I think that, sets up well for him. So I'll go Cal Haladay here.
Okay. I'm kind of making this question up on the fly here. But obviously, Malik Carr and Montorie Foster both had big days against Indiana last week. We talked about the fact that Malik Carr is a mismatch for a lot of teams, and so I'm just going to kind of give you a good old fashioned pick 'em here and ask like who finishes this Penn State game with more receiving yards? Will it be Montorie Foster or will it be Malik Carr?
Yeah, that's tough. I think because I think I want to pick Montorie Foster for how well he's played, not only last week but kind of the weeks before. But I do think Malik Carr, when healthy, when kind of ready to play, has been the biggest weapon for whoever the quarterback is. So barring injury and kind of what he's going to be like, I do think Carr will have more.
Yeah, no, it is. It's an interesting question just because you would expect that Malik Carr is going to be very high on Penn State scouting report about we got to focus on this guy. But as far as receivers, like Montorie is probably going to get some of the similar attention from them. But I'll go Carr just because I think he is a little bit tougher to defend just with his size and the way that Michigan State utilizes him. I should have, what I should have done is this just came to me, but I should have had an over under set for how many flea flickers that Jay Johnson calls against Penn State, because he threw at least 2 against Indiana. We know he loves the flea flicker. But that's one of the ways they try to get Malik involved as well is being on the receiving end of those flea flickers. So yeah, so we're in agreement there. We both think Carr will finish with maybe more receiving yards. JJ brings up a good point. Drew Aller could be questionable going into tomorrow. James Franklin said this week that they expect him to play. Harlan Barnett said that they are preparing for Aller to be the guy, but you never know. That could be coach speak. Obviously, you're not trying to tip your hand too much especially with a starting quarterback type situation. So I think there is a chance that maybe Aller doesn't play on Friday, but as of now, we have no reason to expect him not to be the guy. So, but a good point by JJ. All right, let's move into our place your bets segment here. We'll try to get through these quickly. We're already up at an hour, but this is where we kind of take a look at the best games of the week and we pick against the spread. To be honest, rivalry week is one of my favorite weeks, but this is not the same. This is not as many consequential games this weekend as you typically get for a rivalry weekend, but we'll get into it. But first, updated standings on our picks so far. Aiden, you went 6-0 last week in your against the spread, which was very impressive and surged you into the lead between the two of us. I went 4-2. I went a very respectable 4-2 last week. And so I'm at 29, 27, and 1 on my picks. Which I'm just happy to be above 500.
Right.
And then, but you with that 6-0 surge, you're now at 30, 26, and 1. So you've got a 1-game lead on me going into the last regular season weekend here, which will kind of make for a fun conclusion to this segment. And we'll give an update on one of our future shows about how things end up. But let's get started. 2 Friday games to get us started here. The first is number 17 Iowa at Nebraska. Nebraska is a 2.5-point favorite over the Hawkeyes. Iowa has already secured its spot in the Big Ten championship game, and yet they're a road dog in Lincoln. So who do you like in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Iowa to cover. I think Nebraska, they're still looking for bowl eligibility, but I don't think they're gonna get it this year for, I think it was a 5th or 6th straight year. Yeah, so I think there's still gonna be misery in Lincoln. I think Iowa just finds ways to get.
They do seem to find ways.
Yeah, they just find ways. There's no offense, but they find a way. So I'll go Iowa to cover and win out.
You know what's kind of funny? The line is 2.5 here. Just because Iowa's Iowa, they would be the team to figure out a way to cover a 2.5-point spread, but not win the game. Like if there's one team that could do that, it would be Iowa.
That's
but
true.
No,
that's also true.
But I'm with you. I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes here. Kirk Ferentz, for all of the stuff with Brian Ferentz and all of that, he does seem to find ways to pull out victories. Iowa has been the most in a completely inconsistent division. That's the Big Ten West. Iowa has been the most consistent probably over the last couple of years here. So yeah, I'll take Iowa to cover the 2.5. And yeah, we'll move on with our next game here. This is also a Friday game. We mentioned it earlier in the show. It's the Civil War game between number 16 Oregon State and number 6 Oregon. Oregon's a pretty sizable favorite here. They're at home and they're favored by 13.5 against Jonathan Smith's Beavers. So how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I have Oregon State covering the 13.5, but I don't think they win. I think Oregon is kind of dead set on making the playoff. I think they can do it. I think they can redeem themselves against Washington. So I think Oregon State covers because it is a rivalry game, but I wouldn't be surprised either way either, but I'll go Oregon State.
Sure. I actually picked Oregon State to upset Washington last week. They came close, but fell short. So and with that, their Pac-12 championship hopes were kind of dashed as well. So I'm a little bit curious to see where Oregon State is in the mentality department, just because you've got all this stuff coming out about your head coach and his uncertain future. You just lost to Washington, which ended your hopes for a championship. You're going on the road to Eugene. It is a rivalry game, so there'll be a lot of excitement about that. But I'm questioning the mentality a little bit of this game, and that'll be kind of a good little glimpse to see what kind of job Jonathan Smith does with all of that going on for Michigan State fans. A reason to tune in. So, but with those factors, and I think Oregon is really good. I'm actually going to take the Ducks to cover the 13.5 here. Again, don't feel super strongly about it, but there's a lot of factors kind of weighing against Oregon State in this one, so I'll take the Ducks. All right, moving on. The rest of these games are all on Saturday. The first one, Kentucky is traveling to number 10 Louisville. Louisville's a 7.5-point favorite. An SEC team against an ACC team. Louisville's been pretty good this season. Kentucky got off to a decent start, but it's kind of faded down the stretch. How do you see this one playing out? The Cardinals are a 7.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a close one. I know we saw last week or 2 weeks ago, Miami was favored over Louisville, which was kind of a surprise. But I'm gonna pick Kentucky to cover the 7.5. I don't expect them to win out, but I do think Kentucky. Ray Davis is a really good running back. I know Devin Leary has done well at quarterback for them. They just don't have the horses really to compete in the SEC East. Compared to Tennessee, Georgia. So yeah, I'll go Kentucky to cover, but I think Louisville will still win. Oh, you're muted, by the way.
Wanted to give a shout out to Sean just for tuning in. Appreciate it. Welcome. Yeah, I'm with you on this one though as well. I think Kentucky will cover the spread here. Not sure they win outright, but I think they'll bring a physicality. And let's be honest, Louisville has kind of skated by at times this season, and they lost to Pittsburgh earlier in the year on the road. Yeah, I think Kentucky will at least keep this one close, and so I like the Wildcats as well. Moving on. One of the oldest rivalry games in college football, if I'm not mistaken, but it's Wisconsin at Minnesota. Wisconsin is a 2.5-point favorite. They got off I think they won last week to kind of end a losing streak. But Luke Fickell's first season in Madison hasn't gone as well as maybe they hoped. I'm not selling all of my stock on Luke Fickell at this quickly, but kind of been a jarring first season for him at Wisconsin. But yeah, they're a 2.5-point favorite on the road in Minneapolis. So how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, it's tough because that is a rivalry game that Wisconsin has historically, or just in recent history, has really dominated. I think PJ Fleck has kind of helped try and turn that around a little bit, but
yeah,
I think Minnesota struggled down the stretch. They've lost 3 in a row, and like you said, that they kind of Wisconsin really stopped that kind of momentum of losing last week against Nebraska. It was a close game. They came back and won down 17-0. But yeah, I think they win. I have them covering the 2.5 as well.
Okay, I'm going to go with Minnesota here. You mentioned, PJ Fleck. I want to say Minnesota lost like 10 or 11 in a row against Wisconsin before Fleck got there. It's been closer to 500 since he was there. I don't feel strongly about this at all. I mean, any Big Ten West game, I don't feel strongly about picking against the spread, but I'll go ahead and go with the Golden Gophers here to win outright against Wisconsin. So moving on. 2 games left here. The first of them, number 5, Florida State. We know they lost starting quarterback. What's his name?
Jordan Travis.
Jordan Travis. Thank you. Yeah. Had a brain fart there. Lost Jordan Travis for the rest of the year. His career at Florida State is over. Just a really unfortunate development for the Seminoles, just because they're one of those teams that's vying for a spot in the college football playoff. And not to mention an ACC championship game, a matchup against Louisville eventually. So just feel bad for the team, feel bad for him certainly. And I think that injury has impacted this line quite a bit, as it should. Florida State is a 6.5-point favorite on the road at Florida. So what do you anticipate seeing from the Gators and the Seminoles?
Yeah, well, Florida is also down there. Their starting quarterback, Graham Mertz, sure. He got injured in the Missouri game last week. I do think in the limited time that Tate Rodemaker, the backup for Florida State, was in, I thought he did well. I thought he was serviceable. Um, I still think they're a way better team than Florida. I think, if Jordan Travis is playing, even if Graham Mertz was playing too, that this line would be a lot, larger for Florida State. It is a road game. It is a rivalry game that matters. Uh, but at the same time, I think Florida State is just overall the better team. They have, even with Jordan Travis out, they can still beat you with a run game. Obviously they have Keon Coleman and Jordan Wilson or Jalen Wilson. I can't remember Wilson, their other receiver. So those are big targets for any quarterback to throw to. Um, so yeah, I'll go Florida State to cover the 6.5.
Yeah, I'm really torn here, because you mentioned, both starting quarterbacks are probably aren't going to play in this game. It is the Swamp, but the Swamp hasn't been the same place probably since Urban Meyer was there. If we're being honest, it hasn't been that same intimidating environment, just because the team hasn't been as nearly as strong. This is more just on gut feeling than anything you can look at, a sheet of paper. But I'm going to take the Gators to cover the spread. I don't know if they'll win outright, but I do think this will be a war down there in Gainesville. And I wouldn't be shocked if Florida does pull off the upset. They battled Missouri really close last week. You mentioned Graham Mertz gets hurt though, so that's a factor as well. I'll take the Gators to cover the 6.5, and that's kind of where I'm at. With that, we'll move into our game of the week, and that's number 2 Ohio State at number 3 Michigan. Obviously, there's the rivalry game. There's all this stuff that's going on with Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan program. All of these different factors. I think Ohio State has started to ascend a little bit as far as the trajectory of their season. They seem to be playing maybe their best football of the year right now, and last week we saw Michigan struggle with Maryland on the road. Just a lot of different storylines, a lot of different factors here. How do you see this game playing out?
Is this a pick 'em, or what's the line?
Oh, I'm sorry. The line. Yes, the line is Michigan State or Michigan. Sorry, jeez, you threw me off there with the
Long day.
forgetting the line. But yeah, it has been a long day. Michigan is favored by 3. This number has come down a little bit. I think they opened at a 4.5 point favorite, and it's come down to 3 points, but the Wolverines are still favored. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think, the last 2 years, the momentum of this rivalry has really shifted. And in a massive way. There are those, the Jim Harbaugh, being suspended and kind of the allegations that are out. I know Michigan is kind of pushing towards some allegations towards Ohio State for cheating as well too. So uh, I don't know. It's crazy, but regardless, um, I think Michigan has really just changed this whole rivalry. The mentality that they have and that they brought the last 2 years um, has kind of been, a shock to a lot of people. And I think Ryan Day feels that pressure. Um,
Sure.
so I do think Michigan will win, but I will. Yeah, I'm not gonna pick them. I'm gonna pick Ohio State to cover the 3 points. So I
Okay.
yeah, this is 100% an emotional pick. So
Sure. Hey, you're a Michigan State student. Like I wouldn't expect
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
I wouldn't expect anything less. So,
right.
um, I've actually, it's really strange the roller coaster my thought process about this game has gone.
Mhm.
Even as the Connor Stallion stuff kind of started to come out, I still felt fairly comfortable that Michigan was going to win this game. That started to change a little bit after Jim Harbaugh got suspended. And then there's that whole debacle about filing an injunction in court and all of that whole thing.
Mhm.
And then you look how Michigan looked last week against Maryland. I know that the NCAA was interviewing players last week, so maybe that was part of the distraction going into that game. So my my feelings on this game, as far as the expected outcome, has really shifted over the last 3 weeks as more of this Michigan stuff has come out. As Jim Harbaugh gets suspended. The first 2 kind of days of this week, I was pretty, I wouldn't say heavily leaning towards Ohio State, but I was leaning towards Ohio State. And then earlier today, I was kind of back the other direction, maybe towards Michigan. But yeah, I'm going to stick with those early week, gut feelings, and that's that Ohio State will win this game. I don't, again, not a strong feeling, but I just think that there is a lot weighing on the Michigan program right now, just because everything that's come out, and at some point, like I do think. Speaking specifically just to the players, the Michigan players, I think it's commendable the way that they have handled this and handled business going forward. But at some point, it just it keeps coming with Chris Partridge getting fired, and the NCAA being in the building. It's a lot easier to ignore headlines on the internet, but when the NCAA is in your building talking to you face to face, like they were last week, that's a whole different story. So I'm going to go with Ohio State here. Again, don't feel very strongly about it. I think it's going to be a tight game. But I'll go with the Buckeyes just because I think there's a lot stacked against Michigan going into this game. So that's where I'm at with that. That's where we're at for Place Your Bets this week. We'll see how the last week of the regular season plays out. I've got some work to do now. I'm 1 game back of Aiden, but again, I'm mostly just playing against the 5. I want to be above 500 by season's end. So we'll see if we can make it happen. With that, let's wrap up the show with our score predictions for Penn State and Michigan State, and then we'll get out of here. Aiden, I'll let you take the lead here. What do you expect to see in Ford Field in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see what the environment's going to be, kind of what the crowd, how how much of the crowd is going to be MSU, how much is going to be Penn State. I think down the road, years to come, I think it's going to be a lot different. I think if MSU is competing for bowl game, or potentially a top 25 team, or even competing for the Big Ten, I think it's going to be a really great environment. But I'll be excited to see that. I still think it's going to be a good one. But in terms of game, I think this game could be fast. I think Penn State will use the clock a lot running the ball. They're just really physical up front. I think Michigan State's front 7 has struggled at times, especially against Michigan, Ohio State, even Washington, just not only on pass protection, but the ground game. So I think Penn State is really going to try to key in on that. So yeah, there's really not much more I can say that I haven't already said this whole season about MSU. And kind of we know, anyone who's watched Penn State kind of knows they're not on the same tier as Ohio State or Michigan, or really any of those playoff contending teams, but they're just the tier below that. So yeah, I have Penn State winning. I have it 31-17 right now.
Okay. Well, first off, like, it's music to my ears, saying like it could be a fast game. I would love that, just because it's Black Friday. I'm from the west side of the state, and so it's about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive for me to Detroit. So a quick game would not be the worst thing for me, just because I'm going to be heading home after the game. So I'm hoping that prediction comes true, one way or the other. But no, I'm with you on this. I just with Michigan State, as beat up as the roster is, I just have a hard time seeing them coming up with enough offense to hang with Penn State, even as limited as Penn State's offense has been at times this season. Again, just the attrition with the roster. So a similar score for me. I've got Penn State 31, Michigan State 13. So yeah, again, very similar. Also, I want to point out this as well. So you go 6-0 last week with your against Place Your Bets, and you also you correctly picked the spread between Michigan State and Indiana last week. You had the
Yeah,
score
I
off
did.
a little bit, but
Yeah,
you
I
had a
was.
3-point win for Michigan State, and they won by 3. So you were just on fire
Yeah,
last week.
and Ohio State week, we both picked Ohio State to score 38 points, I
Yeah,
think.
so
So
our score predictions have been pretty good the last couple
solid.
of
Yeah,
weeks. So the question is, did you take that and parlay it and make a bunch of money last week?
no,
That's the real
sadly,
question.
sadly not.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't, because if you would have placed bets on it, then it wouldn't happen. So that's just how that works. But so yeah, there you have it, guys. Our preview show for Michigan State and Penn State. Thank you for tuning in. Longer show today. As you know, some of the chat has mentioned. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your families. Enjoy the football. Enjoy turkey or ham or whatever you prefer tomorrow. I'm a turkey guy, so I'm looking forward to it. Everybody enjoy your families, and we'll see you next time on the Spartan Nation